Hello everyone, Sir Tash here, and today I'm going to be talking about the weapons that we're going to be using for our tournaments. We're going to be using rebated single swords or arming swords and long swords, sometimes called bastard swords, not quite a great sword, also known as a hand and a half or two-handed sword, but we're not talking about a flamberge. We have weight requirements, we have rules in terms of flexibility. I invite you to go look at our page and see our weapon standards. And you're going to see that we have certain flexibility requirements. We also have certain requirements in terms of how the weapon is designed, especially with regard to the pommel. The reason why the pommel is important is, the quillion is important, is we don't want the quillion to be too proud. In other words, to stick too far away from the gauntlet. The reason for this is if it sticks too far away and you go tete-a-tete, that's where both swords are engaged at the pommel right in front of each other's faces. It's actually not that unreasonable to think that this might end up going into someone's eye slot, and we really don't want to have that happen. This is a sword that's actually a little bit too long. I'm using a square, and I've marked on that square our 35mm position, and as you can see, this is just past that position, which is this line right here. It's not very far past it, but it would normally have to be shortened just that small amount to pass our rule set. Most swords that you find these days from dealers do actually pass our rule set unadjusted. This is a typical example of a sword that's available these days, and as you can see, it easily passes our requirement such that I don't have to worry about this entering too far into a helmet. Yes, it can enter in, but not far enough that's going to put out someone's eye. We also have a durability requirement of the weapon. Is it spring steel? Can you flex it a large amount and will it come back to true? In this case, absolutely. This is not a cutting weapon. It's a rebated weapon. You might call it a stage combat weapon if you like, but it will not take a proper edge. The reason why is the metal itself is not designed to take an edge. An edge tends to be very brittle, and by virtue of that gets turned into a saw very, very quickly when struck against another sword. This is designed to be a dull weapon that you use in our form of tournament combat. Other things you're going to need to check your things. This is your new best buddy. It is a nickel. It happens to be that if you take a nickel and you measure it, it happens to be exactly 20 millimeters from side to side, and that is also our tip requirement. So it's now quite easy to judge the end of a weapon by virtue of using a nickel to judge that circumference. The nickel also happens to be 2 millimeters wide, almost exactly, so that if you take that nickel and you place it against an edge, you can very easily determine if that edge is equal to or greater than the thickness of that nickel. Lastly, you're going to need to be able to measure the weapon. We're not going to be looking for exact measurements. We're probably going to have an outline on a table, place a sword next to it. As long as it's close enough, we're not going to really fret about it. But we don't want someone to have an unfair advantage by having a longer sword. If you wish to have a shorter sword, it has to be within the minimums. But we're again looking to have a kind of parity on the field by requiring weapons to be equivalent to each other. We also have a weight requirement. We're not looking for a weapon that meets the length requirements, but is such a crowbar that it acts as a mace. We're looking for weapons that are as close to the actual medieval type as possible. They're not necessarily designed as crowbars. Another thing you're going to need when checking weapons, therefore, is a scale. This is a luggage scale. You can also use a fish scale. Because all the weapons are going to be requiring a pommel, some kind of device for for the wrist retention. It'll be relatively easy to weigh those weapons using the lanyard to determine if the weapon is actually of equivalent weight as required by our tournament rules. You're also going to need a file. That file is important because you need to determine if there are burrs on the weapon. When you do that determination, I highly advise that you have a cloth or a glove, because those burrs, when they're there, tend to be very, very sharp, and they'll slice your fingers open almost immediately. So instead you rub with a cloth, and you can hear where the sticking point is. So you're going to take a file, and you're going to run that file over that area until you've smoothed it out. Obviously, we're not looking to actually sharpen the weapon. We're just looking to smooth out those areas that were rough so that they're not cutting our opponents. So, please refer to our prescribed, recommended list of weapon dealers. Weapons are definitely one of the things that are necessary to be correct for us to use safely. Our tests are not only going to involve the bend test I showed you, they're going to involve hitting perhaps a steel block or a person's helmet. So if you buy an improperly made weapon, you're likely to have it break during that test, and you're not going to want to watch your $300 weapon break. Expect to be paying somewhere in the area of $100 to $250 for these weapons, but the good story is they tend to last a lifetime. These are not weapons you're going to have to replace once or twice or 3 times a year as you do your rattan. You're probably going to be using this weapon for a very, very long time. Look forward to seeing you out there. Thank you.